The fact of this investigation is not new. It was actually announced by the White House over the summer, and it was reported that Pam Bondi had initiated it pursuant to a criminal referral from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Remember when Gabbard had a news conference and said she had uncovered evidence of a treasonous conspiracy, including President Obama and others? That's what this is partially about. And it's just, I got to tell you, I'm not sure in my own mind right now whether the folks that articulate the theory of this case actually believe this stuff, or whether this is just a technique designed to punish their perceived enemies. But here's what people familiar with this case, here's how they describe it. They essentially describe it as a long-running conspiracy to violate Donald Trump's civil rights that began with the Russia investigation back in the first Trump administration, continued through the through the Biden administration, and persists to this day. Otherwise, it must persist in some way. Otherwise, the statute of limitations would have lapsed on these charges. And so they link together both the Russia investigation and the Jack Smith probes. And because the reason it's down in South Florida, that was new. That's what we reported today. It's being led by the U.S. attorney in Miami, is because the Mar-a-Lago search took place in that district. And so that's the criminal nexus, we are told. And Jason Quinones, the U.S. attorney down there, is an associate, a friend, we're told, of Mike Davis, who's an advisor to the Justice Department in the White House, who's been talking very publicly about what he thinks should happen and his vision of this case. Again, a conspiracy against rights, as he puts it, involving multiple people across administrations. The issue, of course, as everyone on this panel well knows, is there's no evidence to support any of this. You described how John Durham, who not exactly a friendly prosecutor to the targets in these cases, looked thoroughly at these matters and was not able to charge anyone. And there's been no new evidence that's surfaced since, even though there's been attempts by Trump administration figures to suggest that newly declassified evidence cast aspersions on certain things. But that's fantasy. So it's really going to be interesting to see exactly how this proceeds and whether this case ever gets past any grand jury, whether in Florida or somewhere else. But what we do know and what we have reported today is that they are preparing to issue a series of subpoenas, some of which ask questions about the 2017 intelligence assessment, which, again, has been parsed over and over, and no wrongdoing has been found. And in fact, I reported at the time on the Durham investigation and the pain that CIA officers, for example, had to go through. They had to hire lawyers and go through rigorous questioning by prosecutors, something that no CIA officer wants to experience. And at the end of the day, as you said, John Durham published a report in 2023, didn't lay a glove on that assessment, didn't impugn it in any way. He was critical of the FBI, but not of the CIA. So where this thing goes is perplexing to all of us, but that's the state of play as I understand it.
Ken, let me do two things. John Ratcliffe, now the head of the CIA, ordered another assessment, and that assessment also corroborates the actual intelligence, nitpicks some of the tradecraft, and then John Durham distorts those findings. And that's some of the intel referral that they talk about when they talk about a referral being made to DOJ. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There was an appendix of the Durham report that was declassified. But I think the way Trump officials have characterized this evidence is just not right. This is very complicated, but it has to do with some evidence that some emails that suggested that the Clinton team was essentially trying to put out the story of Trump-Russia collusion. But Durham himself concluded that these emails were fakes. They were concocted, possibly by Russian intelligence. But that's not how they were described by Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe. And, it just doesn't seem to be on the level. And you're right, the Ratcliffe assessment that he ordered up, it was very careful to say that it was not criticizing the overall conclusion by the CIA and other intelligence agencies that Russia interfered in the 2016 election and did so in a way that seemed designed to help Donald Trump. It had other sort of lesser criticisms of John Brennan and whether he was putting his thumb on the scale, which John Brennan hotly disputes. But yeah, that's what you're saying is accurate.
So, Andrew Weissmann, viewers of this program have been covering this story since before you were available to talk to viewers, to me, or share all of your brilliance with our viewers because you were inside the Mueller probe. And so they'll be familiar with these names, but let me just underscore them. Marco Rubio, now Donald Trump's at least one cabinet position. He used to have two, but he's at least the Secretary of State. He might also still be the National Security Advisor. He was the chairman of a committee that he, as a senator, described as this way, quote, "No probe into this matter has been more exhaustive." John Durham, this was like the right's Robert Mueller without any courtroom success, without any actual accomplishments, a single plea deal from a low-level FBI lawyer. And then John Ratcliffe. And if he sounds familiar, it's because he worked in an intel job in 1.0. He's back as the head of the CIA in 2.0. And when he got back, when Trump won and wanted to resurrect this, he had the CIA review all these things that Marco Rubio and John Durham already reviewed. And this is what the CIA, under Ratcliffe, under the emboldened Trump 2.0 found, quote, "The ICA demonstrated strong adherence to tradecraft standards. This level of analytic rigor exceeded that of most intelligence community assessments. The DA review does not dispute the quality and credibility of the highly classified CIA serialized report that the intelligence community assessment authors relied on to drive the Aspire judgment." So if Brennan is indicted, as Comey and Tish James have been, there are people willing to take Trump's orders to present one side of an issue to grand juries. And so we should put that out there in the universe of the possible. Three people who could defend him if it goes to trial are Donald Trump's Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, Donald Trump's current director of the CIA, and Donald Trump's favorite special prosecutor or investigator, John Durham.
And every member of the Senate who signed that report. So the way I look at this is there's the issue of John Brennan. Not only is there no evidence to suggest that he did anything wrong, we are aware of zero evidence. In fact, this is a case where, as you point out, there's ample investigations that show he did not do anything wrong. So that's on one side of the ledger. And I think the ledger that we have to be looking at is the Department of Justice. One, announcing an investigation into somebody is in complete violation of Department of Justice rules. Announcing and leaking that you are issuing subpoenas is in complete violation of FBI and DOJ rules. And I'd like to point out something about the forum shopping. Ken pointed out that this was being done in Florida because that's where the Mar-a-Lago search was. The Mar-a-Lago search has nothing to do with John Brennan. John Brennan was not in government, if I recall, when that search happened. If you were going to look, assuming that there was even a shred of evidence to investigate, you would be looking in the D.C. area. So I'd like to contrast the forum shopping of going to Florida that this administration is doing with Carol Lenig's reporting about what Jack Smith did. Jack Smith brought his Mar-a-Lago case in Mar-a-Lago because he did not want to engage in forum shopping. D.C. obviously would have been a better forum. There were people on his team who had said that to him, who thought that's where it should be brought. And he was said, no, I'm not going to do that because that's where all of the facts are. That's where the case should be tried. And I'm not going to play games. Compare that to what you're seeing here, which is leaking this information and bringing it in a forum that clearly is inappropriate so that you can hope to get, presumably, Judge Cannon on the case. I mean, you have a real dichotomy in terms of the way in which you're supposed to behave and the way in which they are behaving.
Donald Trump has been bad for Republicans. I mean, morally, but to begin with, but actually politically. I mean, in 2016, he eked out an electoral college win, but then Republicans lost 40 plus seats, tons of local offices in 2018, a whole bunch of state houses flipped. In 2020, Trump lost by 4.5 points, right? A one-term president. He's been an albatross for down-ballot Republican races when he is not on the ticket. Like in 2022, when everyone was predicting the big red wave. And remember, Republicans had a terrible night. I was sitting in this very studio. much of that had to do with Donald Trump directly. Remember, he personally anointed a bunch of really terrible candidates, people like Blake Masters and Kari Lake, TV's Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker losing a very winnable Senate race in Georgia. And then, as lots of Republicans realized that maybe Donald Trump wasn't the best person to lead the party, there was all this Republican momentum to find someone else to run 24. That was the Ron DeSantis moment. That fizzled out. So Trump got the nomination and he won. He won the popular vote. They won a trifecta. There is no one like Trump. His skills, such as they are, and they are real, are unique and not transferable. And so at some point, Republicans do have to figure out like what the party is without him. And Tuesday night served as a good reminder as Democrats handily won up and down the ballot on both sides of the country, leading today's near perfect Politico headline, Donald Trump enters his lame duck era. Tim Miller is writer-at-large for The Bulwark. He's the former spokesman for the Republican National Committee, and he joins me now. Tim, one of the things, the Politico article was specifically about the order coming from Trump to the Senate to end the shutdown by killing the filibuster and passing the budget with 50 votes. Personally, I think that would be substantively good. That's just me. But the quotes are just like, here's Mike Rounds, right? Upon returning to the Capitol, senators made it very clear they plan to blow Trump off. One GOP Senator, Mike Rounds, laughed out loud when asked about the anti-filibuster push. It is notable they seem like they'll do anything for love, but they won't do that this seems like a red line for them.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. There's a first time for everything, right? Of them rebuffing him. I think that there are two things at play here. One is I think that these guys don't want to give up the filibuster because they don't want anything. Like, it's not like they have a lot of big agenda items they're dying to get passed. They can't get passed. I mean, all the things that Trump wants, he's going around Congress and he's doing by executive fiat. And, I think that a lot of the kind of lame duck old school kind of Republicans don't have like big agenda items or big plans. And so they're like, well, if we're going to be around next time when the Democrats are around, they've got huge things that they want to get passed. And they might want to do Medicare for all or abortion, national abortion, limits or, make DC a state, right? And so like there's an imbalance there. So I think that's part of it. The lame duckness, though, that's an interesting question. Is that also part of it? Are they starting to prepare for a post-Trump future? I'm not ready to start sounding excitement alarms on that yet, because on the one hand, who knows what Trump will try to do in 2028, and on the other hand, as long as Trump is with us on this mortal coil, he's going to be posting, and hassling these guys. He's not going to go to Midland and paint like W did, or kind of disappear. So I don't, it's not maybe quite as lame ducky as some of the other recent presidents.
No, I mean, look, I want to be clear here. You would have lost a lot of money over the last 10 years betting for Republicans breaking with Trump, a lot of money, right? So I am not placing that bet. What I'm just thinking about in the wake of Tuesday is that one of the weirdest aspects of the last 10 months is this total suspension of political calculation. There's just this total idea that the party is him and he is the party. We are with him and he is everything. And there's no independent calculation to be made. Everything is subsumed underneath him. At a certain point, it's that first of all, it doesn't work electorally when he's not on the ballot, just in raw political terms. But also, there's going to be something after him. And usually ambitious politicians start thinking about that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and here's the thing is, they don't know what that is.
That's
but
what
a lot of these guys weren't for Trumpism. The ones who have been around before, the Mike Rounds who you mentioned, right? And so, they don't know what to do. It's we go just back.
Exactly.
Obviously, we're not going to go back. What does the next thing look like? That's one group. Then this newer group really is a lot of Trump cultists, right? And so the question is, what does that hybrid version look like? And there's some that have tried to stick this out. Josh Hawley is tried to stick out a little bit of kind of a populist Republican future that's slightly different than Trump. But then anytime he gets out there on something, where he wants to be different from Trump, he backs down, right? Because, Trump still has total control of the party. So I think part of this is a lack of ideas. Part of it is that, they've gotten very comfortable over the last 10 years, just doing whatever Mr. Trump says.
Here's one person who I think is innovating in this space, and I really mean this. Is a person who I think is going to run for president and who is very clearly calculating what
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Correct. Here she is on The View talking about the ACA subsidies. Take a listen.
Democrats voted for the ACA in 2010. It went into effect in 2014. That was the year that we saw our health insurance policy for a family of 5 go from $800 a month to $2,400 a month. And I'll say this, we also watch health insurance companies drop out of the market, and healthcare costs have risen and risen and risen and risen. But I'm going to pick on Republicans. Republicans never fixed it. And then the ACA tax credits were passed in 2021, and there was a sunset date of the end of this year, and Republicans never made a plan for that.
It is, I mean, again, I don't think there's like some, conversion happening. She is clearly calculating some sort of space that isn't just the whatever Mr. Trump says space. It's interesting.
This was interesting. Look, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm a huge fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene now, or the scales have fallen for our eyes, or she's had a Saul of Damascus moment. Though what's interesting about what she's doing is she's offering what a pure right-wing populism would kind of look like in the form of what you see in European parties. Something that's more economically left or big government, but also culturally right. Yeah. And she's expressing that in a different way. And I think that's maybe what the party does end up looking like.
Yeah.
Jake, be careful what you wish for on getting rid of the filibuster.
Well, he could wish for it all he wants. It ain't going to happen. He doesn't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. And as we wrote this morning in our newsletter, and maybe Brez took it out, but I thought it was a particularly artful turn of phrase, which is he views Congress as something to short circuit, not work with. So if you get rid of the filibuster, Katie, it's really interesting to me. Trump keeps making the case that Democrats are going to do it, and they're going to do all these things that are objectionable to Republicans. So Republicans might as well do it first. I don't really get why they would want to take the lump for it when they think Democrats will ultimately do it. But anyway, the filibuster isn't going anywhere. The task at hand right now, and this is going on literally as we speak, there's a Senate Democratic lunch right now, which I'll return to after this, is when do they end the shutdown and how do they end it? And the crux here, Katie, is really this. Are they, are Democrats going to settle on reopening the government in exchange for a promise to have a vote at some point on these Obamacare subsidies? And the answer to that is, I don't know. Mike Johnson has been explicit for weeks that he is not going to abide by that commitment, which John Thune is willing to make. Mike Johnson says he'd rather build consensus in the Republican House for a plan that Republicans like. So, Democrats, listen, they're both in a tough position. And the real interesting thing, Katie, is that Donald Trump seems to realize that this shutdown is hurting Republicans more than Democrats. And a lot of polling suggests that. Mike Johnson and John Thune do not think so, at least publicly.
So if he thinks it's hurting Republicans more than it's hurting Democrats, why isn't he mediating? Doesn't he love to mediate? Doesn't he want to bring two sides together and cut impossible deals?
Right. Why not engage in the art of the deal? I think it's because ultimately, even though the president says that he likes to strike deals, he wants, as Jake said, a Congress who just does what he sees fit, who passes his wish list items. And he thinks that the only way he's going to be able to do that is by getting a filibuster. The president has either posted about a filibuster, mentioned nuking the filibuster, probably at least 10 times in the last 48 hours. So this is something he is incredibly fixated on, especially after the election results. So he saw those election results, and instead of seeing it as, oh, maybe I should negotiate with Democrats, the president and those around him are sticking to this. I asked Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, yesterday, why not negotiate with Democrats? And he said, negotiate on what? Negotiate on what? And when I said ACA subsidies extension, he said, they need to reopen the government and then we'll negotiate.
But isn't there a talk even in the White House that the running out of these subsidies will be bad for them, will be bad for Republicans?
I mean, as Jake has highlighted, I know before, and as some Republicans want this to run out.
I know some Republicans do.
But you're right, that they acknowledge that people are starting to see the premium hikes. That being said, the president, for some reason, despite the election results, is not interpreting those election results as changing his tactics. He wants Democrats to cave here. He wants to be able to walk away with a win. And even if the senators who are negotiating come to him with a deal, it's not clear that the White House is going to say yes to it.
The president's talking about the filibuster right now in the Oval Office. Let's listen.
That attack was very, very powerful. I was very much in charge of that. When Israel attacked Iran first, that was a great day for Israel because that attack did more damage than the rest of them put together. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see voter ID. Who wouldn't approve voter ID? The Democrats. Why wouldn't they approve it? Because they cheat. There's only one reason not. We don't have voter identification. And we should have it. If we got rid of the filibuster, in one day you'd have voter identification. The only reason they don't want it is because they cheat.
Mr. President, there's some people, Republicans, who would also like to see the ACA tax credits extended for middle-class folks who are buying insurance on their own. Right. Where do you weigh in on that?
Well, I don't weigh in, but we're looking at all of that right now. We're looking at all of it. There are a lot of great ideas out there, including for health care, because Obamacare is a disaster. The Obamacare premium is going to go up 17 or 18%, and that's not my fault. I didn't want Obamacare. That's the fault of the people that put it in, the Democrats. And now they want it subsidized further. But, you know, where you take it from them, you take it from a lot of other people. We could have much better health care at a much lower price.
Mr. President, are you doing another one of these drug pricing announcements with another company, or is this the last we're going to see for a little while? About drug pricing, deals that you're
everybody's involved, and we're going to get low pricing from. All companies are being involved. We are now going to have, with all drugs, the lowest price anywhere in the world. That's the price we're going to have.
And will you have
That's called favored nations. We were stupid nations before. We paid 10 times more, sometimes 15 times more, than they were paying in Europe and other places. So that was really stupid.
In 2 years, these will go down. The injectable prices will go down to $250, I believe. But American patients might still look at European prices and say these aren't quite low enough to match that. What would you say in response?
Well, then we're going to match it because as far as I'm concerned, we're at favored nations. If Europe is paying less, then now there could be other reasons. There could be a distribution, et cetera, et cetera. It's harder to get to, but outside of pretty minor things.
All right. So Jake Sherman, he says, "quote Not my fault. The plans are doubling, tripling. It's the Democrats' fault. They're the ones who voted for it initially." That the feeling on Capitol Hill?
No, of course not. I mean, it's a feeling. I just had this discussion with somebody yesterday. Republicans feel as if they in their reconciliation bill, the one big beautiful bill, did pass a provision which in their estimation would have, it got knocked out in the Senate, but would have lowered premiums. And the view that the correct view in my estimation is that this is a policy that's expiring. If you don't do anything to stop it from expiring, it is your fault that it's expiring. I mean, you can't just say, well, all of this stuff is happening. It all happened before me, so I can't, I'm washing my hands of it. Governing doesn't work like that. It's not like the republic began when Donald Trump became president, right? I mean, there are things that previously happened that he has to address, things that are happening now that he has to address. The question in front of this Congress, which is controlled by Republicans, is are they going to extend these ACA premium tax credits? Yes, they were put in during COVID. Yes, they were put in by Democrats. Yes, they held artificially low premiums. All true, but now it's expiring. So either you are comfortable with that or you're not. And what LBL said before is right. Like there are a lot of people up here who don't want to have these credits expire. And two of those people who do want these credits to expire, two of those people are Mike Johnson and John Thune. They don't want to extend these provisions. Like Democrats have gotten in their head, well, maybe if we get a vote in the Senate, we could force Mike Johnson to do it. Mike Johnson does not want to extend these provisions. He thinks it's bad policy. That's his view. And that is, by the way, the majority of the House Republican Conference's view. A lot of them say, well, we'd rather work on a larger health care plan and fix it another way. And we all know how that goes because we've seen this movie before. We've seen when Republicans get involved in health care, it's not been pretty. Could that change? Of course. Of course it could change. They could put together a plan, pass it, get it into law, and maybe it's great. I don't know. That's the future. We can't tell the future. All we can say is based on the past, Republicans have suffered when trying to deal with health care legislation.
So I'm curious about the filibuster. I know Republicans like John Thune have said over and over again they're not going to get rid of it, but the president is still pushing it. And the president with this party usually gets his way. Does the White House believe, does the president believe that if he keeps talking about it, Republicans will ultimately fold, that this is all he needs to do, just yell about the filibuster, and that'll be the end of the shutdown?
There are some inside the White House who acknowledge the votes aren't there. And they acknowledged that a few days ago when the president was first really talking about this in the lead up to election night. But the president views Congress, and especially Republicans in Congress, and he talks about this. He opines about it out loud. He did it when he had them over earlier, which is, maybe you guys won't do it, but I'd really like it if you would do this. He will pressure and pressure and pressure to see if he can get it done. He tried to do this during the first term, but again, the makeup of Congress is so different now compared to when Trump was in office in his first term.
Yeah.
And so he may think, given the fact that they have gone along with a number of his other actions that have taken, arguably power away from Congress, taken some of that power of the purse away when Russ Vought, the OMB director, has been, clawing back federal funds that have been appropriated by Congress. The president may see these Republicans as, why not this time? Why not say yes to me this time, especially when he's trying to make the argument to them that if he is able to get what he wants ahead of the election, that's how he's going to be able to beat Democrats on affordability.
Why would they have a spine on this, Jake? They haven't had a spine on anything else. They're giving him the power of tariffs. He's, striking Venezuelan boats or boats that he says are Venezuelan in the Caribbean, and they haven't sanctioned him or tried to stop that. They're not really pushing back on anything, not the ICE raids. I'm blanking on everything, not the court stuff, nothing. Why would they stop at the filibuster? Why would that be a red line?
It's tough to get into their minds, especially all 53 of them or the majority of them who are against getting rid of the filibuster. But this would ruin what the Senate has been for many, many years, right? Like, you look at the House of Representatives,
what
which
is
does
the Senate?
most of the time operate.
They don't actually come to agreements a lot of the time anyway.
But imagine this, Katie. Imagine this. If you are, the House passes all sorts of bills that they know won't become law because that's what they do, because they can. And those bills, all of a sudden, some of these crazy bills that do pass the House on both sides, right? When Republicans are in control, when Democrats are in control, all of a sudden, you'd get pressure to take those up in the Senate. You know they're not going to become law, and that's why you pass them. But it would make senators' jobs much messier, much more complicated, and it would make the chamber the House. And the Senate has, for decades, set itself on a higher pedestal than the House of Representatives because of that 60-vote threshold. And they see it, and it is a moderating force. It is. But I do concur that Democrats, if they take back control of the majority, will probably get rid of the filibuster, will probably pass things with 50 votes. But listen, it will be a vastly different institution with much wilder swings in public policy than even it is now in this country. And I think that's a risk.
We are tracking this Democratic sweep, which began pretty early on Tuesday night, but it's been sinking in now quickly. Democrats winning double-digit blowouts that cannot be spun away here on planet Earth in reality. And while Donald Trump has led a party that has at times lied and denied about its own election losses in the past, sometimes so unlawfully that allies ultimately paid out hundreds of millions of dollars for their election lies, this sweep that began Tuesday is so clear and decisive that MAGA leaders are not trying that route. Instead, they're facing the voters' rebuke as they sift through the wreckage. And Republican politicians like Ted Cruz clearly know their party will face this similar electorate in 1 year. And he also knows something very simple. Winning campaigns tend to address voters' realities, which right now are very negative on MAGA, rather than denying those realities.
How are you feeling this morning? Like, yeah, I can relate.
Look, last night was a disaster.
Last night was a total and complete disaster.
It was an electoral blowout. The results in New Jersey were disastrous. The results in Virginia were terrible.
The margins are so large, and Republicans lost across the board everywhere in every race. There's really no good news.
You destroyed the Republican Party for a generation.
The Republicans like to lose. They enjoy losing.
Republicans did not have a good day. So anyone who says, well, not really that, but no, it was bad.
Republicans don't know how to win. They don't know who to run. They don't know what to do when daddy's not there to fly them across the finish line.
I don't think it was good for a Republican.
The Republican Party needs to get it together. ASAP.
Get your blank together, quote unquote, because they don't know what to do when daddy's not there, quote unquote. There you have it. The emphasis, though, in whatever colorful language you hear, on the right, is facing their troubling reality in order to change it while they still have a chance. Republicans are not just concerned that they lost those couple states or the races we've told you about. They're concerned about something much larger, something national, something that could wipe them out in future election or elections, plural. They are worried that these trends are real and will continue and wipe them out. In Congress, the Republican Party, remember, as I showed you earlier, is defending this tiny, narrow margin. That's all they got out of Trump on the ballot last year. He did win by 1.5 points, but over in the House, he won so narrowly, and they've since hemorrhaged further in special elections. They can only afford to lose 2 seats. And this week, they lost races by double digits. Some Republican partisans first were trying to deflect, sort of on Tuesday night, a little bit Wednesday morning, we heard this. They would argue that those governor's races were in blue-leaning states. Well, that talking point didn't have a very long half-life. It has now died by Thursday because the data comes in and people take a minute to sift through it. And the headlines you see that we go through on TV and the newspaper, underneath those headlines is a lot more data. And we will synthesize it for you, but it shows that basically the Republicans have a big problem and that Democrats are doing much better with voters than they did just 1 year ago, specifically with the voters that decide national races. Democrats winning with dramatic gains among the people who have drifted back to the Republican Party last year, and that includes, as Axios points out, Black, Latino, and young voters. Dems also won a majority of women voters and nearly half the men who voted. Okay, so you take half plus more than half, well, that's everybody, okay? But it also is important because it cuts into the gender gap that had hurt them last year. Megyn Kelly talks about whether the Republicans have their, quote, daddy, that's the way she phrased it. Well, without their, quote, daddy, as she would put it, or without, as I would put it, the president on the ballot, they have a gender gap that's going the other way. Now, the other thing that we saw was while there were some select races, like I told you about the race in Mississippi, local races, the other thing about anything statewide is it matters more than a House district or a special election. We've had, remember, everyone said, oh, this week is the first big set of races. But we've had some other races across this year, but they were in specific districts. Districts, as you know, are drawn. We have these debates about gerrymandering and redistricting. It's a small pocket. When you get statewide data, though, that's a whole other thing. And the night of, we're telling you about the wins. We tell you double digits. But as the days go on, everyone, the politicos, the data nerds, the journalists, everyone starts going in. And statewide races give you a ton more information. And they explain why someone like Ted Cruz is so panicked. Because here's some statewide information. Almost every single county in Virginia went more blue. Now, this is one of those charts that's a little wonky, right? It's not as dramatic as a red-blue map of the whole country, but the arrows that are blue are good news for the Democrats. And in a different year, like last year, we would have had a lot more red arrows and it would have been a balance. What you see here, if you don't want to call it a blue wave, you can call it a blue shift in that state in just about every county. You can see those shifts across the terrain. They say numbers don't lie. Well, in electoral politics, maps don't lie either. Now, if this map were replicated in other states or around the country next year, it would be lights out for MAGA and the Republicans in the midterms. That's if the trends hold. Now, White House Republican veteran Karl Rove notes that the voters' decisions Tuesday were certainly a result of their disapproval of Trump. Several people close to him had been saying privately the warning signs are everywhere, Axios reports in their behind-the-curtain coverage. Before the election, polls showed a clear, consistent backlash against almost everything Trump is doing. Politico reporting it bluntly, Trump enters his lame duck era. Oh, snap. If the term lame duck is familiar, we have reported on the perils of lame duck Trump on this program, on The Beat, for weeks. And the reason we've reported on that is based on the evidence. There were signs that he was fading. There were signs that Republicans, including we saw Steve Bannon, were nervous about this. And there were signs in the way that our constitutional system works. Much as Donald Trump might not like it, there will be no third term. It's unconstitutional. So he is a lame duck who's not going to be on the ballot again. And our Constitution breaks up all of these different races on purpose. So senators serve a longer term than the president. They serve these 6-year terms, which means they are incentivized to look at their own job security and careers for what politics will be doing, not just this week or in the midterms, but in the years ahead beyond this term of this lame duck president. And what they're seeing, from Ted Cruz to Megyn Kelly to Steve Bannon to everyone I showed you, is it's going down, and it may not have bottomed out yet. Then there are Trump's broken vows. He didn't campaign on masked ICE agents. He talked about going and getting criminal immigrants, but he didn't campaign on masked ICE agents or troops in the street or a lot of the other stuff he's been doing. It's only been a year, but it's almost forgettable that he spent last year and the home stretch, September, October, and this ending month of November, promising to get prices under control and to fight inflation. And a year in, voters think he failed. Grocery prices even jumping, NPR reports. That frustrates consumers. You can't hide that. You can't spin that. Gas prices just as high as they were about a year ago. Trump is out making false statements about all that, and I'm not airing those in this report, but even his rush to mislead on those topics tells you those topics are important, and he wants to change the narrative around the truth, that high prices matter, and the masked ICE agents and the federal troops, with all the attention they get, they don't make people think the prices are lower. I told you numbers don't lie. I showed you where the prices are. Now back to why they don't lie. 71% of people say they're spending more on groceries and utilities than a year ago. By definition, that includes a ton of people who voted for Donald Trump last year. 59%, more specifically, blame him for the rising prices. Remember, he came in at about 49, 50%. 59% blame him for the prices. They lose the midterms if that number is even 52 or 53 nationwide against Republican policies a year from this week. Now, when Trump saw that Republicans lost, he bemoaned the shutdown. And we're now seeing growing delays, lines at the airports. That grinds on. Trump administration planning to further reduce flights by about 10% at the major airports in the country. Utility bill prices may go up further. Federal funding's on hold for a $4 billion program that helps people pay heating bills. And when you look at how they want to play the shutdown, Trump was trying to only release a minority, if any, of the food aid, so more people might go hungry. Well, late in the day today, a federal judge rebuking Trump, ordering them to fully fund those benefits, at least for this month. MAGA leaders who thought they were on the rise or they had some new permanent alignment, who thought Democrats were going to continue to shut down, who thought even that the autocratic efforts by Trump to censor and change how people learn about the news, from gas prices to masked agents, who thought that they could silence or scare the comics, cancel some shows, buy some media, and all of that would change the fundamentals, to say nothing of the law firms and universities. Well, here we are a year later, and suddenly they're learning a Ferris Bueller rule over at the Trump White House and beyond. Life moves pretty fast.
Yep. I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Oh, yeah. Life moves fast. The young Mr. Bueller may have been talking about appreciating what's going on and why sometimes you got to take a day off and enjoy yourself. Well, right now, Democrats look like they're going to be taking a lot of days on because they have a new formula and blueprint that even the biggest MAGA voices say could wipe them out sooner rather than later.